What is going on, everybody, and welcome back to the one place that is dedicated to making your Madden franchises better. Let's talk about auto subs and why they are so important, especially with the recent video that I posted showing that sometimes your players will get fatigued, specifically your running backs or your skill position players, and they don't get subbed back into the game. One thing that I did not talk about in that video because I was still working on was the auto sub sliders and exactly what you need to put them on to make this not happen. So in order to get to your auto sub sliders, let's talk about this here. We're in my Panthers franchise. We're 7-1. I just had to throw that out there. Game's a little bit too easy for me currently in all Madden. I do have sliders put out, so if you want to check those out, look at the channel. I'll leave a link down in the description for my sliders for all Madden that are realistic, that resemble an NFL experience. But to get to auto sub sliders, we're going to be in the home page of your franchise. You're going to go down to manage staff. Once you click on manage staff, here is auto subs. Auto subs are what allows players to get subbed out of a game and then subbed back in based on their fatigue level. And with the new fatigue system that's put in Madden, this is very important for you to make sure that you're constantly monitoring this and changing this depending on your player's overall fatigue level. Because if it decreases over the course of the season and you do not change your auto subs, then there's a chance that your player will get subbed out and never get subbed back in, or he might be a starter and he'll never get quote unquote subbed into the game because his fatigue level is lower than this rating in your auto sub. So let's click on this right quick so that you can get an understanding of what I've got. So first off, we're going to talk about the offense. Quarterbacks, obviously we want those in the game, right? So quarterbacks sub in is 1 and sub out is 0. Now, if you need to understand exactly again what these sub in and sub out means, let's go over that. QB sub in or sub in for any of these is at what point will that position player get subbed back into the game, okay? And then sub out is at what point will they get subbed out? And this is based on their overall fatigue. So an easy way of looking at this, if we look at running backs. So let's say we have the Panthers, Christian McCaffrey. He will get subbed out of the game once his fatigue gets to 70 overall, and he will not get subbed back into the game until his fatigue is at 85. Now, if Christian McCaffrey's overall fatigue level cannot get to 85, let's say we've played a full course of the season, we've had rough practices, and we're going to talk about practice here in a second because that's a big thing. If his fatigue level is only at 80, well, that means he will never get subbed into the game, even at the start of the game, because his fatigue level is lower than you're subbed in. You'll have to monitor that and then lower it down. One of the problems currently in Madden is that there's no quantitative number for somebody's fatigue, at least that I have not seen. If you have seen it, let me know in the comments below. But if you click on a player, there's nothing that shows that their fatigue's at 85 or 83 overall. It just says that, you just see the little bar in the practice menu that we're going to talk about. So for quarterbacks, we don't want them to sub out. So we've got it as low as we possibly can, meaning they'll get subbed out if their fatigue gets to 0, which is not possible. And then we'll sub them right back in when they get to 1. Now, running backs, this is where this can differ based on what type of running system that you want, depending on what team you have, and depending on what type of scheme you've got set up. If you want a 2-back system, you're going to modify these a little bit more. If you want to have a single back system who gets the bulk of your carries, then you're going to want to, change it again. But this is for a general consensus to where this is going to be set up for a main running back to get somewhere around 85 to 90% of the bulk of the carries throughout the game. And just for reference, let's look at this with Christian McCaffrey. All right, guys, so here we are looking at the running backs. Now, look at this for what I currently have. Christian McCaffrey has 175 carries. He's almost rushed 1,000 yards, 5.5 yards a carry. He has 8 touchdowns. Chuba Hubbard has 71 touches for 460 yards and 6 touchdowns. I'm running a lot because I'm trying to figure out some things with my sliders. And Chuba Hubbard also had like 2 games where he played pretty much the entire game because I couldn't figure out what exactly was going on. But even with this and the sliders, you see Christian McCaffrey is basically averaging around 75% of the touches. And that is even with the fact that Chuba started basically 2 games. If you kind of like that setup to where you're going to have a back that's going to get the majority of your touches and get subbed out maybe 1 or 2 times a drive, then what I've currently have the sliders set on or the sub in and out on is going to be perfect. If you want something that's going to be more of a split carry, then you're going to want to increase the sub out and increase the sub in. And I'll leave that based on whatever you feel like is best because, depending on whatever you're trying to run, you're going to know what's best for that. All right, so now we're going to go to wide receivers. Wide receivers are, again, another position where they get subbed out every once in a while, but not a lot. So we're going to keep this at 75 and 60. Fullbacks, 75 and 60, but most teams don't really use fullbacks, and if they do, they're not going to even get fatigued enough for this to really count. Offensive linemen, they stay in all the time. Offensive linemen never leave the game right unless they're hurt. So we're going to do the same thing for them as we did for quarterbacks. Defensive tackles. Now, defensive tackles are also another position that I kind of use the same way with running backs. You know, you see defensive linemen, especially defensive tackles, get subbed in and out of games quite often, right? They have rotations. There's different roles along that defensive line. You know, you have some players that are just straight pass rushers, some people that defend against the run. And then, of course, those big guys, they're strong. They're constantly in contact. They wear out over the course of the game, so they're constantly subbing in. They're the only other position that really does that as heavy as I would say a running back does. Because of this, defensive tackles really don't fatigue a lot in the game. So I have this at 80 and 75, which will mean you'll see some of your starters come out. Maybe the substitute will come in for a game or two, and then you won't see them, or you'll see them come back in. And we'll look at these stats right quick of what I've got with my defensive linemen. So here we are looking at the defensive line. So you see Hassan Reddick is one of my DNs along with Brian Burns. Derek Brown starting defensive tackle, and then Daquan Jones is also a tackle. But you see Gross Matos is kind of my backup guy. I got him subbing in, role playing, also a defensive tackle and he's actually getting some touches as well. So I think this is pretty good. He's a role player. He gets subbed in and out quite often. But I did just recently increase the defensive tackle sub in and out so that they get subbed out just a little bit more because I feel like they weren't subbing out quite often. All right, and then defensive ends are a little bit different. Defensive ends are a little bit more versatile. They don't get tired as easily, so I'm leaving this at 80 and 65. Linebackers, we don't want them out of the game. They do come out every once in a while. Maybe your outside linebackers, your middle linebackers stay in the game 90% of the time, right? And then corners, they usually stay in. Same thing with safety. So we've got corners at 80 and 60 and safeties at 70 and 50. So let's look at the practice menu so that you guys can understand exactly what happens if your overall fatigue level gets too low where guys ain't subbing in. I'm gonna tell you exactly what you can do to fix that. So let's look at the fatigue level right now. All right, so what you're going to want to go to, we're here on the main menu of the franchise. You're going to go to weekly strategy. Once you click on weekly strategy, this is the new thing added to franchise. With this, you could change your overall game plan. You can look at, you know, the upcoming team and what they specifically like to run. So here are the Patriots. They're number 21 in turnovers and so on and so forth. They pass the ball a little bit more than they run it. So then we're going to go to player health. Now, this is for the defensive game plan. You're going to look at this first. So a great example here is Hassan Reddick. Okay. Hassan Reddick is a right end, and he is already going into that orange fatigue level. We don't really know the numeric value of that. We just know that it's getting kind of low. Your tier Gross Matos, as you've seen previously, is rotating in and out. Same thing with Brian Burns. Jones, our defensive tackle, Derek Brown. So our whole defensive line is starting to wear down. Now, I can do a few things here. The first thing I could do, the easiest, is just go to half pads. So I'm decreasing the practice intensity, which means they won't fatigue quickly. You know, they won't fatigue as quickly as if they're in full pads. Another thing you can do, because decreasing this to half pads means that they'll get lower XP. So somebody like Jeremy Chin, JC Horn, Dante Jackson, these are young players in my secondary that I want to develop. So I don't necessarily want to do half pads. I still want them to get a lot of XP and develop for next year. So what I think is the best thing to do is, based on the fatigue level, is either change the reps from split to backup. Now, in the case of Brian Burns, what I'm going to do is I'm going to keep him in split because he's still not hitting that yellow. Hassan Reddick, I am going to put him in backup. We're going to have Gross Matos come in and practice. Now, this is going to put more strain on Gross Matos, but Gross Matos is a role player. He substitutes in, and I'm not really worried about his fatigue level quite yet. And we also have good depth with Marquise Haynes behind that. Defensive tackle, we're going to go with split, again, because those guys do not have, their fatigue hasn't gotten to the yellow yet. Now, unfortunately, like I said, you don't know the numeric value. You don't know if exactly this is going to be a foolproof plan in getting your players' fatigue level back up to whatever you have your auto subs on, but it's just something you got to play with for the time being, unfortunately. So we're going to go back out of this. We're going to advance this, and then we're going to go to the offense. So here we're in the offense. We're going to look at Christian McCaffrey. This is a great example. Christian McCaffrey, Chuba Hubbard, they're being used a lot. So in this case, I am probably going to do my best. I'm going to do a half pads in this situation. Also because Sam Darnold is also low. Tommy Tremble is low. Robbie Anderson, Terrence Marshall, Cam Erling, they're all getting low. So I'm going to do a half pads practice for them, but I'm also going to do split reps at the quarterback position, and I'm going to do backups for the running back position. And then I think the last thing I'll probably will do for wide receivers is I'm probably going to do split reps just so Robbie Anderson and Terrence Marshall both don't decrease too much. And we can kind of let Keith Kirkwood, Shy Smith, also get some reps in there and develop as well. So this is the things that you got to do. You can't just go through here and haphazardly just click full pads, practice every single week in and week out, and not keep an eye on this fatigue, because it will affect who can play, how long they play, and then affects your overall status or chances of winning a game. And when you get into the playoffs, if everybody's fatigued and you've got starters getting subbed out and they never get subbed back in, your chances of winning are not too good. So I hope you learned something today. If you did, hit that like button for me. And remember to stay up to date on all these content and more, hit that subscribe button down below, because as much as Madden is going to be changing with the new franchise updates, and because of how bad Madden is currently, you're going to want to stay up to tune so that I can give you the best knowledge that you can possibly get so that your franchises are best. I'll catch everybody later. Floopy Donkey out.